What happened was.
Hey friends, it's so nice to see you. It's today, the time is now. You are here and the weather is outside your window.
How does one become a composer? Here to tell you about his journey and his fabulous summer abroad writing in Italy is Brooklyn-based Canadian composer Matthew Ricketts. Hi.
Hi, Zachary. How's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Are you in your home right now?
I'm in my tiny apartment in Brooklyn, yes, which is very small and very hot.
It looks grand and like you're in a French palace library.
Yeah, and it's not quite palatial, but it's the operative word is cozy. Usually when people come in, they say, "Oh, it's so cozy," which I think is just a fancy way of saying that it's like a closet. So
Well, that's, New York living.
it is New York living, yeah. And the bedroom actually is the closet. So yeah, it's all very small and but functional.
Hey, that's all that matters. And we're artists, so we do what we can and, create magic everywhere. So
Yeah, the plus side. I mean, I'm in Fort Greene here in Brooklyn, and it's very very quiet. Actually, it's not really what you think about New York. The first thing that comes to mind, but it's a very quiet neighborhood, and we open to a large garden in the back, which is almost never has any activity other than birds. So
Oh,
it's
wonderful.
yeah, half the time I don't even feel like I'm in New York at all, which is kind of incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first job in New York was at the Lafayette Avenue Presbyterian Church in Fort Greene.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, just down the road.
Yeah, yeah, I sang in the choir there for several years, and
Okay,
yeah, it's
yeah,
such a wonderful neighborhood.
that's a beautiful church.
Yeah, and terrific music there, and a fabulous community. So
Yeah. Okay. So you know it well then.
I do,
Did you
absolutely.
ever make it to our park?
Yeah, many times.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's such a beautiful neighborhood, and I literally had just moved to New York, so I had, that was my very first community and my very first taste of, I guess, breaking the stereotypes of what you think New York is. Like you were just saying, you think loud, and you have this quiet, beautiful spot, and
Yeah. It's basically yeah. It sort of feels like Sesame Street, I guess. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. Which I think is actually supposed to be in Brooklyn or modeled on Brooklyn.
I believe so. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, New York in general still maintains its neighborhood identities, and I think that's a
Yeah.
really special thing.
Yeah. And it's full of Muppets. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So you just returned from summer in Italy.
Yes, I spent 7 weeks at a residency in Perugia, or near Perugia in the Umbrian region.
Oh,
It took me a good few weeks to get the sort of levels of like the region versus the city versus the town then and then specifically the little mountain that I was actually staying on.
wow.
Yeah, but it's just outside of a small town called Umbertide, or Umbertide, as I was calling it until about 7 weeks ago.
Perfect.
And it's a kind of it's sort of a 15th century castle that has a residency for artists in it called Civitella Ranieri. And I was there just writing music and living the Umbrian dream.
Oh, I know that dream well because my very first job in opera was in Umbria, and I did
Really?
yeah, brand new opera by the composer Kristen Hefner, and
Okay.
on a little, mountain at a little castle in a little town.
Were we the same castle, perhaps?
No, probably
Okay.
castle down the road.
Okay. um, yeah, that's wild. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's all these little. I mean, there's obviously lots of big stuff happening in Italy, but yeah, all these kind of like smaller like opera festivals that
Yeah.
yeah, I ended up when I was there, I commandeered the car because we were able to take a car if we wanted to go on a little day trip, and I drove all the way to Narni, which is about 90 minutes south of where I was staying, where my friend Jake Landau was having an opera premiere in this like medieval town that was just like clinging to like the side of a cliff and had
Ah,
all Roman ruins. And then there's just this like new opera festival where it was a double bill with a Puccini Sir Angelica, and then this new opera. So yeah, I mean,
Oh,
Italy just seems like this endless ways in which like the new and the old are sort of interacting and kind of like layered on top of each other in this very complicated kind of archaeological palimpsestic way.
absolutely. And you know, it makes sense there's so much opera there over the summer. It's the birthplace of opera, right?
Is indeed, yes. I was, yeah. Is it, where is actually Mantua, right? I think is where L'Orfeo was.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. 1607. I remember that from teaching music history. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you very much feel that, that, I don't know, that like buzz or charge of history. I kept on touching things while I was there and feeling like I was like the old stone, and felt like I
Oh,
was kind of having this, I don't know, seance with thousands of years of history.
absolutely. I also had that experience. It's an incredibly charged place, and you know, of course, in the United States, our history is very different, and you're of course from Canada, and
Yes, which
you
is
know,
even more different. Yeah.
yeah. So that ancient history of Europe is very visceral,
Yeah,
and you can indeed touch it and
you
feel it.
can.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's really superb. Well, that's just fabulous. I'm incredibly jealous of your Umbrian summer. It sounds perfect.
Yeah, I was jealous of myself, and I was
Yeah.
I kept on, I kept on feeling what I described as preemptive nostalgia. Like I felt even like after the first week, I felt like I was already missing the place, or already sort of looking forward, looking imagining how I would feel by the end of it, and that did indeed come true. So, but yeah, I'm hard at work trying to find ways of getting back there somehow. I'm determined to make that happen.
You'll get back, and it will live in your heart forever, and it will inform all of your work forever. That's
Yeah.
just those experiences, as you know. That's how that works. So
Yeah, and then the music that I was working on while I was there, I was doing a number of different projects, some vocal, some instrumental, but yeah, those pieces are very much about the place and about my experience there in some ways. I guess they're kind of um, yeah, I guess they're kind of autobiographical, and to the extent that music can be that. And they feel very much touched by the place itself and the people I was meeting there. The residency had it was a mixture of composers, poets, visual artists, and sort of painters or sculptors, people in the plastic arts. So I was interacting with a lot of them, and sort of the experience of being around all these poets also very much influenced the work I was doing. Even when I was not explicitly writing texted music, it still felt very sort of infused with the poetry of the place.
that's gorgeous.
Yeah.
So, how did you become a composer?
I'm still in the process of becoming a composer, so I would not say that it's a process of becoming. I don't know if I could say that I am there yet, but still trying. But yet, let's see. How did I become a composer? Well, I guess there's a number of ways I could narrate this. But yeah, I don't know. Piano from a very young age, piano lessons from a young age, but something I weirdly never took seriously. I guess I think that was somehow important, that music was about pleasure,
Hmm.
rather than like practicing per se. So I was never going to be a sort of virtuosic concert pianist, but I was always at the piano playing all the time, and often not exactly playing what I was supposed to be playing, but was sort of playing from ear, and I guess in some way that was kind of composing in a sense,
Yeah.
because trying to pick out, I was obsessed with film music, and this is to age myself slightly, this is before the internet, or very early days of the internet, where you could just go on IMSLP or find just, I don't know, transcriptions of all music that you've ever wanted on the internet. And so I was having to sort of pick out things by ear a lot,
Yeah.
just listening. And yeah, and I guess somewhere in that act of transcription, creativity obviously comes about in the failure to transcribe with complete fidelity. Therein was birthed something creative, I guess, and sort of filling in all the parts that I couldn't quite figure out. So I always thought that something about like the limitations of my ear and my fingers actually led to me to develop creative muscles that ended up coming in handy as a composer.
Oh, that's fabulous. Well, and not to mention when we do find music sometimes, it doesn't really sound like what we hear in a film score when we play it on the piano.
Yes, yeah, it's in the wrong key, or
Yeah,
it's been finessed by some cheesy arranger and doesn't.
right.
Yeah,
You have to connect the dots and
yeah, you still, yeah, it's not just yeah, it's not fully cooked yet. You need to add something to it, you know.
absolutely. Yeah. So I'm also a child piano kid and grew up at a piano bench, and yeah, had a very similar experience pre-internet also. And
Okay.
yeah, yeah, I 100% get it. And that desire to hear something and then bring it to life on the keys, and not and and sometimes getting your hands on music and it's like, this is terrible and not what I've heard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then alongside that, I was also very interested in architecture. Again, from a very dilettantish standpoint, it was never something I took like seriously, but I was just obsessed with sketching floor plans like endlessly,
Oh,
like designing very fabulous and rather camp like mansions and opera houses and like public monuments and just very large, gaudy, and always highly symmetrical exteriors. I don't know why I was obsessed with these like mansions that were completely symmetrical and that had these staircases that kind of went like that, like on the Titanic, which I was also obsessed with. So yeah, I don't know, somewhere in there, like the architect and the interest in blueprints, and then the composer that was more playing by ear sort of cross-pollinated, and maybe that's like the ingredients that made me the artist that I am somehow.
yeah. Well, putting pen to paper in the architecture of music is a very real thing. And
Something like that, yeah. And I think I was always really obsessed with, yeah, like that relationship between the blueprint as a kind of two-dimensional object, and then the building as a three-dimensional thing, and what kind of tenuous relationship those things had. And of course that's completely analogous to the musical score, and then the musical object as a real breathing three-dimensional thing.
absolutely. Oh, I love that. And so, writing an opera, I guess, is the giant dream of almost every composer, because it is this grand, enormous gesture.
It's
Was
the
that,
musical equivalent of the gaudy mansion, right?
yeah, yeah.
With the big staircase.
Is that something you immediately thought, like, I want to do that? That would be wild. Like, how did,
Yeah, I mean, I guess I came to opera a little bit later in my, yeah, it was not something I was immediately interested in as a listener. Like
yeah,
I did not listen to opera for a long time. And when I finally began to get into opera, I sort of started from the wrong end, or maybe not the wrong end, but chronologically, I sort of started with, 21st and 20th century repertoire,
that's
and
the right end.
and then slowly kind of worked my way back. And then I became interested in early music, and so I started to sort of work my way from that end. And then I think the two ends met at bel canto, but never actually made it through to that repertoire. So I have this weird blind spot in the middle where I'm just like, I don't really know or care about like Donizetti, but but like everything after that and everything before that, I'm like, okay, this is where I want to live.
I think that's completely fair, and
Not to like I'm not judging fans of that repertoire, but it's, yeah, I just kind of, yeah, I sort of didn't reach that part of opera history ever.
yeah. So
Yeah.
my first opera I ever saw was The Rake's Progress, and
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. The first opera I saw was Porgy and Bess. So
okay.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
that really influences kind of how you see opera. And of course, like I said, the first opera I did was a world premiere by
Yeah.
a living composer. So it's
Yeah.
however you were introduced to it, I think that influences where you go with it. And
Yeah. And I guess, yeah, there is no correct starting point, of course, because you're never going to start in, again, 1607 or whatever. Like you're come at it through some crazy back door. Rake's Progress, what a crazy back door to enter into, because I mean, it's sort of like it's like The Simpsons or something. Like you watch it as a kid, and then you laugh because there's funny things happening, but you rewatch it now and you realize that there's all these jokes happening on this level that are referencing things that you didn't actually know what they're referencing. Like you heard the joke version of the reference before you actually heard the reference. And so then if you learn the Rake's Progress before you know like Mozart or Verdi, you don't even know like all the things that he's playing with, and that it's all about the costumes and putting on the wigs and sort of doing this strange play with style and pastiche.
Yeah. It was an incredible experience. I remember distinctly the usher handed me the program, and I said, "I'm so excited! This is my first opera." And the usher said, "Oh no, this is a terrible choice for your opera."
Oh no!
Yeah. But it was the coolest thing I had ever seen by that point in my life, and it greatly influenced my taste in opera. And I think when I got into opera, and I primarily leaned into recent works and
Yeah. And have you done a Nick Shadow?
Not yet.
Okay.
I shall. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think that would be a great casting choice.
I would love to. Yeah. It's a little dream.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a really exciting project coming up with the one and only Pulitzer Prize winning librettist Royce Vavrick, fellow Canadian.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
So I had known who Royce was, of course, for a while, and I had seen several of his operas, and I remember seeing Proving Up when it was done at Miller Theater here in New York, and I was astounded and just so viscerally moved by the work, because it's very, very intense.
Oh yeah.
And I think I found him on Facebook or something. How these crazy things happen, and so I think we were like sort of aware of each other. And two queer Canadian artists that had like relocated to Brooklyn. I guess it was inevitable that our paths would actually cross. But then we'd sort of sent some messages, and then earlier this year he wrote me a message and said, "Have you ever heard of the cremation of Sam McGee?" And I picked up the phone and said, "There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold," and started reciting it. And I said, "Heard of it?" Like, I committed this poem to memory when I was a child, because it's such a cool campfire story. It's kind of a spooky poem. It's kind of balladish. It's by Robert Service, who's a kind of Canadian Robert Frost, very, very folksy. And for most Canadian youths, you just like grow up with this poem.
Wow.
Yeah, it's sort of like a long narrative poem that's ballad, sort of ballad style. And he said, "Well, that's great. I'd like to do something with this. I think it would actually make a really interesting opera." And I said, "Absolutely, sign me up." And so we ended up applying for a grant from the Canada Council for the Arts just to begin developing it. And we just found out the grant was successful, and so we're going forward now and sort of beginning to accumulate people. And it's reifying. It's kind of becoming a real thing. It's still going to be sort of years down the road. Of course, these things take a long time.
Forever.
But hopefully not forever. So Royce, I mean, he's the busiest man in the biz. So, but I think he set aside some time this fall to begin sort of drafting the libretto, and he has some really interesting ideas about how we sort of want to make it into an opera, and want to sort of maybe fracture it into different maybe sub stories, or sort of make it into like 3 different interrelated stories that are all looking at this original poem from different angles, maybe in different time periods. So all of that is still kind of nebulous, but it's this amazing sort of spooky ghost story that's about a couple of gold miners in the Yukon in the early 20th century that culminates in a cremation, as the title gives away, and then a very, very surreal follow-up to what happens after the cremation, which is there's a kind of magic realism to the whole thing, and I think, like, to me, that's like what opera does the best, where there's this kind of idea of enchantment and strangeness and surreality. I think that's where opera is like does its thing the best, because it's so strange to sing anyways. So yeah, so I think that works. Yeah, so I'm really excited about this project with
That's fantastic, and I totally agree. Opera is a place for the biggest, strangest ideas, and
yeah, and like, yeah, I mean, of course there are exceptions, and of course, like, there are operas that I love that try to do the sort of like Verismo thing, though even Verismo is not Verismo. I mean, it's still like, you know, I don't like, could anything be less realistic than La Boheme, you know, like it's just like such a but yeah, so but I think we're really going to lean into that idea of sort of like of opera and enchantment, and again, that is such a sort of iconic piece of Canadiana. We really want to sort of do something interesting with it, because no one has adapted it thus far for this kind of transformation into music. So
that's so exciting. Sounds like a hit to me. And I mean, being an American and never having heard that title, I'm already entranced by it, and it sounds like something I want to see.
yeah, you can it's public domain at this point, thankfully, so you can find it online. Yeah, and there's a series of amazing paintings by Canadian painter Ted Harrison, which he did later, but usually the two are combined, like in a sort of book form, where you have the Ted Harrison paintings and the Robert Service poem. And again, for a Canadian, this is you get fed this with your Fruit Loops. Like everyone just knows this.
Rather to be fed with Fruit Loops, but yeah, but it also says something really cool about growing up there. Well, congratulations on the grant, and
thanks. Yeah, we're excited to see where it goes, and yeah, and we have some cool people already sort of on board to work with us on it.
Heck yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, can I ask you some questions?
Yes. This is like rapid fire?
Are you ready? Can you handle it?
Yes.
All right. Don't think too much. Here we go. Zodiac sign.
Capricorn.
Favorite flavor of ice cream.
Tahitian vanilla, and there's a story there, but we got to move on, so keep going.
Coffee or tea?
Depends on the time of day. I start with coffee and with tea.
So both.
Yeah, both.
Favorite color?
Green.
It's a good one. Yeah. What shade of green? Because there was a question mark there. I need to know more.
Oh, it depends on what point in my life we're asking this question. I think when I was younger, it was more like a forest green I identified as, but now I think it's getting lighter as I age.
Okay. Do you ever venture?
It's like neon green at this point. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
no, like a lighter green. You know, like maybe more like grass.
Okay. Yeah.
I've moved from the forest to the grass.
Absolutely. Best vacation spot ever.
Oh, holy moly. Vacation spot. Well, I mean, I can't say Italy, or can I?
You can if you want.
Well, just because it's on my mind. I already talked about it, but yeah. I mean, it wasn't exactly a vacation because I was technically working, but when I go back next time, I'll probably be vacationing more. So yeah, I gotta say Italy.
Absolutely. Beach or mountains?
Oh, mountains, but only because I'm deathly afraid of the sun and getting a sunburn. Otherwise, I love the water and I love swimming, and I even love sand. What's the line from Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind? He says, "Sand is overrated. It's just tiny rocks," which I think is funny. No, but I do love a mountain. I'm from some mountainous territory in Canada, and yeah, I love hiking also. So.
Yeah, I'm a beach guy myself, but I also love the mountain.
Okay, but you got to wear sunscreen. You got to be careful.
I'm from Florida, so I have a big.
Especially with all we share the private real estate up there. So
the hats are for.
That's what hats are for, exactly.
Yeah. All right, you can spend an entire year living as anyone who's ever lived. Who is it?
Oh. Mahler.
Oh, very good.
But I guess it depends on what year of his life we're talking
That's
about.
a pick. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be turbulent and very like emotional, but
Yeah.
I would just love to have that Mahler experience of hearing one of those orchestras playing one of the first rehearsals of one of his symphonies. I think that would be incredible, actually.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and also getting to, you know, conduct some of the greatest operas ever written, and yeah, and then having a very dramatic family life. Yeah, that sounds like a very interesting year.
Similarly, you can spend an entire weekend away with anyone who's ever lived. Who is it?
Oh. I only have a joke answer, which is Oscar Wilde, and because that then makes me think of, there's a great Kids in the Hall sketch. Do you know Kids in the Hall? This
Yeah.
is another Canadian export.
Yes.
Where it's like someone stuck on a desert island with Oscar Wilde, and he's like, oh, this is going to be amazing because it's so entertaining, and it gets old in like 4 minutes because Oscar Wilde just keeps on like pumping out these one-line witticisms, and this guy's like, you have to stop talking, Oscar. But I think a weekend I could do.
Yeah, some fabulous dinners and perhaps strolls
absolutely.
in the park. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, you can go back to any time in your life and tell your younger self in that moment one thing.
Oh my God, that's so personal. That's so much more personal than ice cream.
Yeah, I bait and switched you.
Oh my God. I've never thought about that before. I'm gonna say no regrets. I wouldn't want to mess with this like Back to the Future kind of, you know, once you go back and say things to your earlier self, you could just mess up everything. So
True.
yeah, the butterfly effect is a real thing, and I'm not going to mess with that. So
I like it. I like it.
I'm going to stay in the present. Thank you.
That means you're very happy with who you are and where you are. And
Yes.
that's great. Yeah. Okay, this is the final question. It's a biggie. What is the meaning of life?
Meaning of life. Zachary.
I am not the meaning of life, but that is a good one.
That was not my answer. Maybe you are. No, let's say, I don't know. It's like, let's say it's maximizing happiness, but then that's yeah. But then there's like a lot of there's a lot that's then dependent on what you mean by happiness, and that personal happiness is, of course, it's constricted and also related to, you know, the people around you. So it's got to involve not just yourself, but happiness defined as communal happiness, familial happiness, interpersonal happiness, intergenerational happiness, international happiness. Yeah, but happy. Yeah, maximizing happiness.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer.
Okay.
Well, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, this is your Dallas Opera debut.
Yes, it is. Yes, but hopefully not my last.
Absolutely not. We'll see the cremation of Sam McGee there in 2025.
26, let's say.
Okay. You need a little more time.
Yeah.
Well, be well, and I look forward to seeing you very soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's all for today's episode. Puppies and rainbows till we meet again.